I know the O-line is the talking point right now, but this Ole Miss team will only go as far as the front seven takes them.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast around. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's show, we're going to dive into the offensive line, which they have been the subject of fan panic after some shaky reports and scrimmages. Is it really time to worry heading into 2025, or do we actually not know anything yet? Next up, we'll spotlight the players who have taken full advantage of fall camp and forced themselves into the conversation for playing time, but we will start on the heart of this team. That is the front seven. They've been dominant all camp long, and make no mistake, Ole Miss will only go as far this season as this group will take them. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers who make this show what it is. And what that is, the most fun way to follow Ole Miss sports. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on the audio podcatchers and give it a 5-star review. Please, it costs nothing, but it helps keeps all of this free. And if you want more, join the Insiders program in the subtext link down below. No trolls, 14-day free trial, and the easiest way to cancel, so give it a try. And don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Nearly every team, college or pro, they are ready for you. And coming up in Ole Miss trivia, the clue today is LSU versus Ole Miss on Halloween. So this is a really big year for the front seven. And we're going to back it up to 2024 a little bit and talk about that, because everybody that was on the defensive line for Ole Miss got drafted into the NFL, and you come back and the most dominant unit on the team is likely the defensive line again. Pete Golding has done a fantastic job of recruiting, developing and evaluating on these players. But Ole Miss lost Walter Nolan, who was the best defensive lineman in the country. You have Jared Ivey. Everybody knows how good Jared Ivey was. He ended up with like 10.5 sacks last year. You have Princely Amonmielen, 10.5 sacks, and J.J. Pegues, who was a fourth down running back for Ole Miss. And that defensive line moved on to the NFL. So everybody assumes after that happens that there's no way you're going to be able to replace that, to replicate it. But what is going on in the early part of fall camp is the front seven is dominating. Even without Paul, even without Jared Ivey and Princely Amonmielen, the front seven, they're absolutely dominating this fall. And everybody's going to say, but the O-line, or but this happens. Which is the question for what goes on? Is the defensive line elite? Is the offensive line trash? That is the question that is going on amongst the fan base. And you can tell who you're dealing with in the fan base, which side they are willing to take on that. Now, I will admit this, okay? Ole Miss has not played with its tackles in the scrimmages this year. So it's been backups. It's been essentially the twos in a lot of situation going against the front line in the scrimmages. But when the offense has gone best on best with the defense, the front seven has still really performed. Now, Cam Franklin made a huge jump in the offseason. He put on massive weight. He looks like an absolute beast. And as Pete Golding said in his press conference, he's twitchier than he looks. So he is somebody that you need to pay attention to on the strong side of the defensive end. Zxavian Harris, we have all talked about. He was a big-time contributor on the defensive line a year ago. That was so good. Zxavian Harris this year, an all-SEC caliber camp. He looks really good of what's going on. So you have him and Cam Franklin. Over at another 3 technique at the defensive tackle position. There's a competition between Jam Brown, who's a really good football player, and William Eccles, who is also a really good football player. That hasn't been decided, but I think right now Eccles might have the advantage. We'll see over the last 2 weeks until the Georgia State game and even beyond. And then you have the jack position, where Deshaun Womack and Prince Will, Amami Ellen, and sometimes Santarin Perkins, they are all playing in that position. What has happened this year on the defensive line and beyond is this is going to be the most versatile defense, the most versatile unit that Ole Miss has had since one platoon football became a thing. You have free safeties and free safeties that can play corners. You have corners that can play free safety. You have linebackers that can play safety. You have linebackers that can move down and play jack. You have jacks that can move to strong side defensive end. You have strong side defensive ends that can move inside to defensive tackle. You see what I mean? There's going to be a ton of packages for everybody on that defense. It's not just going to move Santarin Perkins around. It's going to be moving Cam Franklin around and Deshaun Womack and whoever's on the field. Personnel groupings are going to turn out. You're going to have a race car package, a true race car package, to where Cam Franklin can slide in to the nose tackle and maybe Deshaun Womack can play the strong side in, and you have Prince Will lining up as a 5 technique, on a 3-man defensive line with Santarin Perkins at the jack. It's a true race car purchase or package. This Ole Miss team will only go as far as the front 7 take them. The front 7 is going to be the strength of this team. After 2 weeks of fall camp and hearing all the stories from absolutely everybody, I'm convinced that as the front 7 goes, this football team is going to go. Now, if you look at who Ole Miss has on the schedule, let's bring up the Loom predictions, and I feel pretty good about them still. That number that I picked back at the beginning part of July of 10-2, I still feel pretty good about. The reason that the offensive line has time is because of the schedule, and the reason this defensive line is going to be so good is because of the schedule. 5 of the first 6 games on Ole Miss's schedule is at home. That means that the other team has to deal with crowd noise. It's going to be in the mid-60s as far as 65,000, 66,000 in the stadium. Ole Miss always oversells. That noise is going to affect Georgia State. It's going to affect Arkansas. It's going to affect Tulane. It's going to affect LSU. It's going to affect Washington State while they control what's going on. I have said from the very beginning, this Ole Miss team needs to start 6-0 if the playoffs are a legit thing that can be reached. And for that to happen, the front 7 has to have a big first half of the season. With Georgia State, Arkansas, Tulane, LSU, and Washington State, Arkansas is going to be better offensively. Whenever you look at Bobby Petrino, they're going to be better. Georgia State, I'm not exactly sure what to take. Ole Miss should have better players than them. Tulane, there's a Jeremiah Masoli situation at quarterback with a player coming in late in Retzlaff. LSU is going to be pretty good, but they have the same questions about the offensive line that Ole Miss has. So if Ole Miss is as good as we think they are on the defensive line, they should be able to envelop LSU. And then Washington State, their coach, their quarterback, everybody left for a different situation. The coach at Washington State now was at South Dakota State last year, which means they're going to be good. Those guys know what they're doing, but in year one, it's going to look a little bit wonky. And then you have the at Georgia and at Oklahoma, South Carolina at home. Those 3 games are probably going to write the narrative on this football season. So we'll see exactly how that goes. But the front 7 will be absolutely key for the Ole Miss football team in 2025. If Ole Miss makes the playoff, this front 7 was dominant. If Ole Miss goes, 9-3, this front 7 was not as good as we thought they could be. Everybody wants to talk about the O-line and stuff like that. No, you just have to take into account the position and how good the O-line is with your play calling. You can't act like it's the 1980s Washington Hogs out there on the offensive line. If they're a little bit weak, you have a quarterback back there, you have excellent running backs and the best skill players that Ole Miss maybe has ever had as a group. The way you account for the O-line is just by accounting for them. Don't go for it on 4th and 1 if the O-line is struggling, because the odds are not in your favor when it comes to that. All right. In our next segment, a handful of players have really taken advantage of fall camp, and they are knocking hard on the door for playing time. Who are they? How big of a role could they carve out this season? We will tell you that next. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football is not far behind. So whether you've got your eye on a big-name quarterback or a breakout running back, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in on the game. Maybe it is just the hard knocks happening right now, but I am a huge Josh Allen guy, and I think this might be the year for Buffalo. Prize Picks is a way for me to kind of test that theory. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, to get $50 in lineups after you play that first $5 lineup. That's the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, to get $50 in lineups after you play that first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. When I'm on top of my hydration, I notice everything works better. My energy, my mood, my focus, even my skin. But getting enough fluids every day is not always easy. That's why I've been loving Drip Drop. Drip Drop is doctor developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb the fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half of the sugar of the leading sports drink. My go-to flavor right now is cherry limeade. It's a game changer after a workout or on those extra busy days. And walking twice per day in the Florida heat, it's absolutely draining. But Drip Drop is able to help all of that. Right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits really hard. You know, when we're talking about players and fast risers and surprises, sometimes you can go overboard with that, if it makes sense. There's always guys like Devin Thomas back in the day would always have a big spring game, and then in fall camp and in fall games, they would kind of just disappear. This year, though, it feels a little bit different with some of the players that took steps that you weren't exactly expecting. Some of the players that had a big fall camp, whether they are a true freshman or a transfer coming from a lower level, or just somebody that has waited their turn, they have taken full advantage of this fall camp. And there's several players in this camp that have made jumps. The first one is Izaiah Hartrop. We talked about after the first scrimmage, he was the leader in the clubhouse to take the punt return job. But with the wide receiver room being kind of weird, we question how much he would actually play during the season. Listen, Ole Miss doesn't substitute very much. They say they want to. They say it's good. They say it should be the way it is. But Ole Miss doesn't substitute that much. If that changes, that changes. But we are going to act like this year is going to look like the last 5 years at Ole Miss. And if it changes, absolutely fantastic. Yay. But Ole Miss did not substitute very much in 5 years. And a lot of that has to do with tempo, what's going on. It's just that they can't, because if you run players off the field, then all of a sudden the other team can slow you down. It kills tempo. Heck, look what Illinois did to the South Carolina Gamecocks a year ago as far as putting on a clinic into getting into a coach's head. All of these games could happen as well. But Izaiah Hartrop at wide receiver, he's somebody that could find himself in the rotation. Him and Deuce Alexander, those are the big two. Traylon Ray, I like him as well. I hear his name a bunch, have not heard his name as much lately. But the starting three, presumably, will be Deshaun Stribling, Harrison Wallace III, and Caden Lee. The second group of players is that Traylon Ray, that Deuce Alexander, that Izaiah Hartrop. And two of those three players getting on the field would not surprise me at all. Another player on the wide receiver side of things that has made a name for himself in fall camp is Dillon Alfred, the young guy out of Saraland High School in Mobile, Alabama, originally from Gaucher. Unbelievably smooth-looking player. I don't know how much he's going to play because of what I just mentioned before. And then Winston Watkins, who was the star of fall camp or spring camp as far as social media goes. Winnie Watkins could absolutely see himself on the field. Now, the winner for the punt return battle, whether Traylon Ray returns kickoffs or punts and Deuce Alexander, that is one thing that can happen because the athletes that you have, they're good enough that they can step back there. And recently at Ole Miss, Jordan Watkins was the punt returner for Ole Miss, and they used Ulysses Bentley at kickoff return. I like having somebody that's a little bit bigger back there returning kickoffs because I saw Dexter McCluster almost die against Vanderbilt. That I want some meat back there returning kickoffs. Punt returners, it's a shifty, it's a side-to-side thing. I think Winnie Watkins would be a great player, but coaches are so risk-averse, essentially, that you're not going to see a freshman back there returning kicks. You're just not going to see that potentially. But I think Deuce Alexander or Izaiah Hartrop will be back there as well. On the offensive line, true freshmen, Devin Harper and Connor Halls, both of which are tackles at heart, both of which are taking advantage of the uncertainty. We're going to talk about the injuries and all of the rumors and the fan base freaking out about the offensive line next segment. But Connor Halls and Devin Harper, they've taken advantage of that situation and that injury bug mounting to make themselves be in a really good spot. At tight end, there's Caleb Odom. He needs to come back from injury to get ready for Georgia State, but when he is full go, he is a special player. Cam Franklin, we talked about earlier, he took a big step in the offseason and now is the presumptive starter at the strong side defensive end. Taj Chambers, that is somebody at linebacker next to TJ Daughtery. He has had a big camp as well. And defensive backs, you have Dante Core. You have Ricky Fletcher. That's his name. I got there. Ricky Fletcher. You have Antonio Kite that had big moments in the defensive backfield. But those are some of the players that have had a really good camp for Ole Miss moving forward. I think all of them are in line for some kind of playing time. So we'll see exactly how that goes and what that means. Now, in our final segment, it is the easy reaction to say the offensive line is doomed to struggle. It feels like a foregone conclusion, right? But maybe that's not the case. And there are reasons for optimism. We'll break all of that down. That and Ole Miss trivia next. You know, if you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That is why you need open phone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. Open phone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. Do you juggle 2 phones just to keep business and personal calls separate, Open Phone solves that problem for you instantly. Your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox. No more who's handling this. And the AI agent handles after hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads. So I never miss a customer again. So see why over 60,000 businesses trust Open Phone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedoncollege. That's openphone.com/lockedoncollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. So over the 2 scrimmages in fall camp this year, there were reports that came out of the quarterback running for his life. They can't block the front 7. All of this thing was doom and gloom for the offensive line. Reports coming out that, hey, this guy's running for his life. This offensive line could not block them. Nothing seemed to work. And now what you have is a panic amongst the fan base that the offensive line is not going to be good enough. And I've mentioned on my reports of what was going on that in this last scrimmage, the number 2s got completely overran by the Ole Miss defensive line, and Trinidad Chambliss running for his life. But I don't think this is as bad as we think, because the panic is coming from inside the fan base, not inside the Manning Center. They're not necessarily frantically moving people around. They're not acting like it is a huge problem. And if they're not acting like it is a huge problem, we need to act like it's going to be okay. Listen, in the first scrimmage, you were without Jayden Williams, and you had P.J. Wilkins running at right tackle. You were without Patrick Kutas, and you had Delano Townsend running at right guard. You had 2 of the 3 pieces sitting out that day. Even Lane Kiffin pointed that out. In the second scrimmage, you did not have Jayden Williams, one of the presumably starting tackles, and you didn't have Diego Pounds for very long. Delano Townsend got a little bit nicked up and knocked out, and we don't know exactly the severity of that. But you did have Patrick Kutas in that situation. So you were down roughly 2 out of the 5 starting pieces on the defensive line for both scrimmages, going against a defensive line that we all think is going to be very good. 2 elite. It's one of those things that you need to pay attention to what's happening, because they are going to be very good. So if they're not panicking inside the Manning Center, they're not panicking at scrimmages trying to find stuff, they might be moving things around. I think the fan base needs to take a step back and take a deep breath. It's not a panic-worthy situation. Now, that said, this offensive line a year ago, Ole Miss had trouble running the football. If Ole Miss has that same trouble running the football, you need to not go for it the same way that you did in the past. On 4th and 1 and 4th and 2, don't take it as such a sure thing. Whether it's Damian Taylor back there in the Wildcat or whatever's going on 4th and 1, you need to be very judicious about going for it if your offensive line is bad. Because the honesty in this whole offensive line situation, the offensive line gets so much blame for 2024. I mean, they just own every single bit of it, but nobody goes after the fact that if you're struggling to run the football and you're running the ball on 4th and 1 and you don't get it, and you do that over and over and over again, that's not on the offensive line at that point. That's on the coach's staff. That's on putting the players in a position not to succeed. It's one of those reasons that I say that analytics is just the old English word that means bad football, because it doesn't take into account problems that you have. Problems that Ole Miss ran into in Tiger Stadium. Problems that Ole Miss ran into in the Swamp and ended up losing those games. Ole Miss had a 12-0 roster in 2024. One of the best rosters in the game. They should have ended up in the SEC championship game and making a long run in the playoffs, but they didn't. And everybody trying to figure out the why of that situation is how they pretzel themselves. That's how they tie themselves up in knots. It's not always the offensive line when the offensive line looks like the piece. There could be other reasons that position is struggling. And a lot of that has to do with play calling. A lot of that has to do with situational awareness. A lot of that has to do with getting the best out of the 5 players that are on the field. The thing that I'm going to look for as soon as the Georgia State game happens, I want to see snaps. In 2022, that was the 8-5 team. Ole Miss could not snap the ball to the point where you could not time up a jet sweep to do all the things that you wanted to do, actually hampering the offense. That was something in 2022 that we thought of. Reese McIntyre in 2024. God bless him. He was good. He wasn't that good. There was a hole in the interior of that offensive line. That was one of the reasons they weren't able to run the football. The center position in Georgia State, the center position against the Kentucky Wildcats, thank goodness, what is his name, Deion Walker or whatever his name is not coming back. But Ole Miss has a chance to be really, really good and good enough on the offensive line. There's no reason to panic, in my opinion. So, today in Ole Miss Trivia, we are talking about Ole Miss versus LSU on Halloween. The Rebels have not played the LSU Tigers on Halloween for quite a while, but the last time they played, what was the year and the score of that football game? And for bonus points, what do we remember about that game? Put your answers down below. We will put the answer out on social media a little bit later on today. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we are the front door of Ole Miss. If you don't believe me, Google Ole Miss podcast and see how much the Locked On Ole Miss podcast comes up. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment on the YouTube channel and on whichever podcast you're listening to. It helps the show. It is completely free. Your support means the world to us. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to college football's landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hotty toddy, everybody. And remember, analytics is just the old English word meaning bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.